When you want to modify objects by transforming or combining them, there are two general methods. Use a panel or dialog box if it's accuracy you're after, or use the mouse and keyboard if you prefer to eyeball what you're doing. So I'm going to show you several methods of molding objects so you can get what you want.
When we talk about transforming an object, we're talking about how we can move and rotate and maybe squish an object. And there are really three ways of doing it. One way is just by eye or by mouse, simply taking an object, selecting it, moving it around. But maybe you want to do it by an exact amount. You want to do it by number. Then there's two ways of doing it. One way is with the Transform panel, and the other way is from the Object menu. Let's begin with the Transform panel first because it's much more simple, and then we'll go into the Object menu. The file I have open is called Curved Swish, and you'll find it in the Chapter 6 folder of the project files. So let's select it, and the Transform panel is not one of the panels here by default if you're using the Essentials workspace. So what you could do is go up to the Window menu, scroll down if you need to, and choose Transform, or you could use the shortcut if you like. Let me move this here onto the screen. Now, there are two basic things that you could do here is set the location, that is the X and Y location, that is horizontal and vertical. You could also set the width and the height. And the little thumbnail there gives you an idea of what it's talking about. By the way, you'll notice that my ruler is set to inches. If the ruler on your screen is showing pixels, points, or something else, you can simply go up here, right-click the ruler, and choose inches. I mentioned earlier in the course that Illustrator will reset the rulers every so often. So this way, when you're in inches, you should be seeing the same numbers in this panel that I have on screen. And also you could choose rotation and what they call shear. Sometimes people call it skew. It's kind of like squishing, and the little thumbnail there kind of gives you an idea of what it's talking about. You also need to understand here, this little symbol is called the proxy, and you notice in the proxy there's one of those 9 dots is selected. That's called a reference point. What that means is this. This object here, if you decide that you want to set it to an X and Y, a particular location on the page, well, there's more than just one point, right? This object, it has length and it has height. So this X and Y, which point is it? Well, right now, the proxy, the reference point of the proxy is the upper left corner dot. That means this X and Y refers to this selection handle up here. Maybe if you want to set the X and Y to the middle of the object, think of if you draw a line down here horizontally and a line across vertically, then you can choose the middle of that proxy, the middle reference point. By the way, this is notoriously hard to select. As you click different reference points here, the X and Y are changing. The object is staying the same, but this is just showing you, okay, here's the different locations of this. So I'll just stay here with the middle reference point, and maybe I decide I want this to be maybe an inch down and 2 inches over. I'll simply change this to be 1, and I'll hit the Tab key, and I'll make this 2, and I'll hit the Tab key. And you see what's happening is, yes indeed, there's 1 inch across and 2 inches down. And just another reminder about the ruler, if you don't have your ruler visible on the screen, remember you can press Command-R on the Mac or Control-R in Windows to make the ruler visible again. And if I drag this here onto the page, you see that changes. If I want to rotate it, I can type in a rotation amount, or I could choose the common amount. And you notice there's negative and there's positive. Positive numbers mean rotate counterclockwise, and negative numbers mean rotate clockwise. Okay, so that's really all the Transform panel does. So I'm going to close that out, and I think I'm going to undo this. I'm going to press Command-Z or Control-Z on Windows just to get it back to where it was. Now let's take a look at the Object menu. So leave it selected, go up to Object, Transform. You see I have a whole bunch of options. Let's choose Move. So you see this is kind of similar to where it was. Now as soon as you do it, you might see the object kind of bump outside of its selection handle. Hey, what the heck is that? If that happens, it means you have Preview turned on. If you deselect Preview, then the object isn't moving. So there's two ways of moving an object in this dialog box. One way is by setting the horizontal and vertical amounts. Another way is simply by saying, okay, I'll do it by the crow flies, and I'm going to choose a distance and an angle. So unlike the Transform panel, which had absolute amounts of what's the X and what's the Y. This is more relative from its current position. Positive numbers means move the object either to the right or down. Negative numbers means move the object to the left or up. Let's say I want to move this object maybe 2.5 inches over. I'll make that 2.5. And maybe 1 inch down looks good. I'll just make that an exact amount. Tab over. Now you can't see anything happening until you preview, and now you see the thing is moving. If you decide that you want to make a copy of this object as it moves, instead of clicking OK, click Copy, and now you have the original, and here you have the one that's moved. So I'll just delete it, select the original object. Let's go back to Object, Transform, and Move. Move the dialog box out of the way. And this time, I'll do it by distance and angle. Let me turn the preview off so it's back to where it was. Let's say I want to move this maybe 4 inches, and I want to move this, let's say, kind of down and to the right this way. And when I preview it, I can see there it's moving 4 inches down, or maybe that's too much. Let's say 2 inches. And there it's moving. So you have either way that you can do that. Now we have these two checkboxes that are great at transform objects and transform patterns. That's useful if the object has a pattern fill. Right now this object has a solid fill, so there's no meeting. That's why those are grayed out. So I'm just going to cancel out. So with this object selected, let's give it a pattern. Over here on the right, I'll go to the swatches panel, stretch this out if you need, and there's a couple of built-in patterns. I'll just choose this one here, and let's put that back. So now we have some kind of interesting pattern in there. Now let's go up to the Object menu, Transform and Reflect. And let me just turn that preview off for a moment. So we have horizontal and vertical, but let's do angle first because that's really rotation. And that's simply what angle. You could type a number in there, or you can dial this. So I'll dial it this way, and when I preview, you can see the thing is rotated. Or leave the preview on and rotate it. And as you move this little angle thingy or type in a number, you can see it rotating. And of course, you could copy it while you're doing it. Now you can see transform objects are enabled. Here's what this means. If you transform the object only, the object will move, but the pattern inside will stay the same. So take a close look at that pattern. As you change the angle, the pattern is staying the same. It's just kind of the object is moving around it, kind of like a cookie cutter that's moving on top of the cookie. But if you transform the pattern as well as the object, the pattern is going to move with it. And this is really cool. You could transform only the pattern and leave the object alone. So if I deselect that, here the object is in the original position, and I have transform pattern. As you change the angle here, you notice that the pattern is changing inside the object that's standing still. You want to have both of these checkboxes selected, because that's probably what you'll expect to see most of the time, but, well, maybe not always. Now, you can also reflect it. Rather than rotating an angle, you could do it horizontally and vertically. And I always get confused with this because horizontal does the opposite of what you expect. You would expect horizontal to reflect it horizontally, but it really reflects it vertically, and vice versa for vertical. And you might wonder, okay, well, what genius decided this? And what this is really doing is horizontal means what's the axis where it's going to reflect, and vertically is also that vertical axis where it's going to reflect. Choose horizontal, and you see if you turn the preview on and off, it kind of looks like it's reflecting vertically, head over heels. It really is, but that's because it's a horizontal axis. And if you choose vertical and turn the preview on and off, you see it's rotating, kind of flipping side to side because it's a vertical axis. Now, let's cancel out of here because I want to show you there is another way to do this. If you take a look over here in your toolbox, if you click and hold, you have on this icon here, you'll have either a rotate tool or a reflect tool. Rotate tool is probably there by default, but let's choose reflect tool. There's kind of two ways of using this. Again, make sure this swish is selected. One way is to kind of treat it like rotation, and you can just sort of drag it around and rotate it. That's not a big deal. I'll undo Command Z or Control Z in Windows. What's really cool is you can set your own axis. So let's say I decide I want to flip this on an axis, maybe kind of going upper left to lower right. what you do is click once here, and then move the mouse pointer to the lower right and click, and now you see it's been reflected there. If I want to reflect it maybe over here, I'm going to click once here and once there, and now it flips there. But wait, there's more. In addition to reflecting it, you can reflect a copy. So what I'll do is, let's say I'll click once here, and I want to reflect it up in this area. So I click once there, and instead of just clicking there, I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key in Windows and click, and now you see I have a copy that's reflected. I think that's pretty neat. I'm just going to get the selection tool and delete that. I don't need that guy. I'm going to put this over here. Now let's take a look at scaling. I want to set a plain solid fill back to the object. So leave it selected. Let's go over here to the swatches panel, and any old fill color you want. I'll just make this yellow and move this thing back. Page moved. I'm just going to do a Command-0, Control-0 to get this back. Now let's also apply a stroke. So maybe go up here, and I'll choose, let's say, a dark blue, and let's make it, say, 2 points so we can get a look at it. Leave it selected. Let's go back to the Object menu, back to Transform, and Scale. Move this out of the way. And again, the preview is on here by default. You can scale this by uniform amount, so that's going to scale the width and the height the same. Non-uniform, you can scale the width and the height different amounts. But here's the cool part of this dialog box. So here's the cool part of this dialog box, is that it lets you scale both strokes and effects. I'll leave the preview on. I'll turn that off. Now you see I have this set to 200% just because that was the last time I used it. If you want, again, you can just simply go in there and type a number. I'll make it, let's say, 250%, so that'll be 2.5 times the size. Tab out. And you see the object is getting bigger, but as the object gets bigger, the stroke is very thin. So if you choose to scale the strokes, now the stroke is getting bigger in proportion. Let's say maybe I'll set that to 150% just to make it a little easier to deal with. Okay, let's rotate this object because there's one last thing I want to show you in that object menu in this lesson. So just a basic transformation, I rotated it. Now let's say you want to use this object as it is maybe in another drawing, and you just don't like the fact that this selection handle, that the bounding box is kind of rotated. You want it kind of squared off as though this is an original. What you do is this. Leave it selected, go up to the Object menu, Transform, and at the bottom of the flyout choose Reset Bounding Box. And now it's reset as though the object were born this way.